only through, of course, our assessors associations. We have lots of the vendors there. But, there's always a new angle to it when we're listening to the subject matter experts in their home field. So I'm excited to be hearing from all of you guys and excited to take that information back to the group. I know that with all the affiliate groups, I was the CASA liaison for quite some time as well. And I know that there's potentially struggles each year getting participants. We try to, as liaisons, act on your behalf with the association and make sure that the assessors know how important each of our affiliate organizations are to the whole and to everything we accomplish in our offices. So I look forward to being an advocate to this Cadastral Mappers Association and to representing you with the assessors for however long this position may hold me here. So I thank Bonnie. I've had opportunities to work with her in the past through Megabyte and other groups. So it was nice to have a familiar face when I came in. I was like, hey, somebody I know. So that was a benefit. And I've had an opportunity to also work with Brett a little bit since he's come into office. So I'm excited for what that holds as well. But I'm not sure just how much wisdom I shared with all of that. But again, I do look forward to this. I appreciate that all of you take the time out of your day to come together and share information between each other, to utilize this as an opportunity to hear from your vendors and how they can assist us in accomplishing what we need to do here in our assessors' offices. So thank you all. Did I sit here and look pretty now?
Let me stop focusing on you for everybody. And okay. Did I turn everything back on? I have just gotten word my assessor, Brett Frazier, is going to, he's still attempting to make it. As Leslie said, she's seen me in other things. We are a megabyte county. If you don't know about me, it's not surprising. For the last 11 years, I think it is, something like that, Kurt has attended the CCMA. He's been holding down the fort for our drafting area. I started in drafting 23 and a half years ago. My heart still lies with drafting. I am a mapper at heart. Actually, we did a cleanup in our garage. I found my favorite childhood toy, which was a states map of the United States. I was excited because all of the pieces were there. It is now hanging on the wall in my house, put together, and the box below it. I'm that much of a map nerd. But one reason Kurt handled that is pretty much in our office, if you are not putting value on something, you're under me. So my position is Deputy Assessor Appraisal Support Operations is the full mouthful. Then that's what it means. I'm over the budget, I'm over the clerical, I'm over the transfers, I'm over the exemptions, and on customer service. I also do the first line tech support for the office. And so it is a lot of interesting work, and I still love my maps though. It's 9:30 now. I'm going to give us an extra little break at this point. Everybody can get up and do their necessary walking around, getting another cup of whatever you prefer to drink and things of that nature, to give Brett a chance to get here by 9:45. I will give you a heads up. I forgot to do this until the middle of Leslie's speech, talk, whatever she wants to refer to it. We are recording this event, my brilliant welcome and roll call, and luckily not my Pledge of Allegiance, were not recorded for posterity. So just be aware that anything you do and say on here is being recorded. If the presenters have problems with that, let me know and we will stop it during your presentation. So please feel free to take a break, and I hope Brett will be here. If not, I'll go in with my next spiel. So 9:45, everyone.
Yeah.
Hi, Robert. How are you? Oops, sorry. I should sit down
Good.
before I talk. Good to have you here.
Well, anyway, I don't know if am I muted or not?
No, you're not muted. I'm hearing you.
Sorry, I'll mute myself.
Oh, I was just greeting you. That's okay. No problem.
I'm not used to using Teams. I apologize.
I know it's not everybody's tool of choice, but I think we've got everybody on. I haven't gotten any crazed messages saying help, help.
I'm going to mute myself now, Bonnie.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Bonnie. I can't hear you, Bonnie.
That whole muted mic does that. It works. You've got your hands up, or your hand.
Yeah, all I'm seeing is the agenda. Am I missing part of the program, or are we on a break, or?
We're on a break. I'm still waiting to see if Brett Frazier, who's our assessor, can meet with us or not. Let me
Okay.
stop sharing that because that was a mistake. Thank you for letting me know.
I'll take my hand down
Okay.
if I can figure that out. Okay. There we go, right there. That should fix it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and then Bryant from our office, Favela, has joined us also. I invited him. He's the GIS coordinator I told you about.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Let's see if our Brett has joined. Let's see that. That's.
I'm going to so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, if everybody is back, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going to start on the next part. Brett is coming in right now. Brett is having a busy morning, and I don't see that he's had a chance to log in yet, so we will continue on. The next item on the agenda was for me to give everyone an overview of Madera County. So let me get set up for that. I'll show you what I'm looking at. It shows up twice on my computer. So this is, I hope, fairly brief overview. I think I'm allotted half an hour. I'll try not to ramble on that much. I've lived in Madera County my whole life, so I could tell you things you don't want to know. There we go. Madera County is right here. We are bordered on the north by Mariposa and Merced County, on the south by Fresno County, and the east we have Mono County and just a tiny touch of Tuolumne County. Madera is easy to find for two reasons. It is the middle of the state, which is, I think, let me see if my next. proven because at North Fork, they actually have the exact center of California marked. And this is a monument they have at the location. It's also, in my opinion, easy to find because it looks like you flipped California over on its back. It has the same basic shape as California. Madera County, let me get my notes where I can see them. Excuse me. Madera County was separated from Fresno County in 1893. They had a special election on May 16th, 1893. And the story, as I remember it, I think there's a couple of variations on the exact events, but Fresno County had made a rule that to vote in this particular election, you had to have a seat in the room. So the delegation from Madera County arrived and all the seats were taken. So Madera County, not being willing to give up. Now, a part of me remembers that there was a band outside, and another part remembers they got a fire brigade. But there was a commotion outside, which of course, everybody in the building ran out to see what was going on. And when they came back inside, Madera County had the seats. So we separated from them by a vote of 1,179 to 358. And so everything north of the San Joaquin River in Fresno County became Madera County, which, if you're not familiar, the name Madera comes from a flume that went from the California lumber company, which if you go to Yosemite at 41, you pass the Sugar Pine Railroad, and the flume came down to the city of Madera, which gave us our name, and the county was named after the city, which means lumber or wood. Timber is another definition I've seen. The lumber mill is why Madera became the county seat and the bigger town. We have two incorporated towns, Madera and Chowchilla. They're both on Highway 99. Other towns in the county that are large communities would be Oakhurst, Horse Gold. We have two new developments out on 41, Tesoro Viejo and Riverstone. They are completely new developments. They started within the last 5 years. For Riverstone, I just had to go through and give APNs to 3 new subdivision maps. They were all parts of the same development. They came to about 750 lots. That's a small part of that new development. So Madera is growing, and we've got some other items I thought I would share with you. These are pictures of the flume. It was basically just a V-shaped wooden structure. I believe there is still a place up in the Bass Lake area. You can see a portion of it. There's also a sample of it in the Madera Courthouse Museum. And as you can see in the picture down on the left, it was only for business purposes. There was a lovely older woman who visited our office one time who told us about living up in the mountains, and they would ride a log on the flume down into the valley for Saturday night and then get a wagon back up into the mountains. Another area you may be familiar with is Bass Lake, which was developed to generate electricity. It's a dammed lake that was created. The land around it is federal land and was owned or at least leased to PG&E and has developed into quite a recreational area. Up in the eastern part of the county, about a third of our county is federal land. We have just a little bit of the Yosemite National Park, but this is the Devil's Post Pile, which is in Madera County and is an interesting little place. I walked out to it. It's not far from the parking lot, but you do have to come in from the eastern side. You can't get there from here unless you hike. This building I included just as a point of interest. It's actually been in the Los Angeles Times. After 9/11, a farmer out on 41 painted his building this way. It's become something of a local landmark. A year or two ago, somebody vandalized it and the local residents jumped in with paint and fixed it. It was that important a landmark for us. This is our original courthouse. It's no longer used as a courthouse. It's now the museum. It has history of Madera County and other events. It's in our courthouse park, which is a lovely park here in Madera. And it is open only on the weekends, I believe. It's totally a volunteer effort. At Christmas time, they have various groups and people decorate the rooms for Christmas. So it's a fun time to go and see it. Another item that, in looking at things from Madera, that I'm very proud of Madera for, we actually have an educational method named for Madera County called the Madera Method. The gentleman with the top hat, Bill Coate, is the one who developed it. He was an elementary school teacher. I think he's retired and just is the coordinator of this system. But the students do historical research into local history and publish a book about it. I was fortunate one year he did an adult class of it. The refuge is the home of the Mordecai family. His name, my brain is losing things this morning. The original Mr. Mordecai, who came to Madera, was one of the first people to reside in what is now the valley portion of Madera County. And so I got to actually be a part of this. We published his letters back to his family in the East. But here are several of their projects. I don't even know how many. My one nephew is in his 40s, late 40s, and he was one of his students when he first started this project. They used to have a man who would take a group of students on a wagon train up in the mountains and different locations. The one on the right, the Sonny Nishimoto's family, I included. It's one of their more recent projects. Sonny Nishimoto is actually somebody from my own personal history. The Nishimoto family owned the Bridge store here in Madera. There's a school named for their family. And actually, Sonny's son works in our planning department. So it's quite a project to have in your county. So that's a few items that I wanted to share with you. Let me stop sharing. Oops. There we go. And Brett is here now. My part, it took about the 15 minutes you should have, Brett. So you can talk all you want. We'll be a little ahead of our schedule, but I'm sure nobody will mind an extra long lunch break. So Brett, I will, if you are ready, I will turn it over to you and spotlight you for everyone.
Yes, good morning. That was Bill Coates, was the teacher. Welcome everybody. Sorry for starting this. I had to take my dad to a procedure this morning, and then I get a call from the high school that my son might have pink eye, so I had to go pick him up. So I'm sure it will in Bonnie's hands, but just wanted to welcome all of you and thank you all for I hope you learn a lot, and I know everything that I need to know, and so again, you'll be in good hands, and wish we could have had you all in Madera County. If you see behind me, this was my last trip up to Bass Lake, where I had a bear that one of my friends from Southern California didn't shut the door, and this bear came into our cabin, and they're incredibly intelligent. It opened the refrigerator and took a package of 4 New York strip steaks. So if you are visiting in bear country, make sure that you close your sliding glass door. That's just a little tip and trick from the Madera County assessor. And with that, welcome, and I hope you all have a great conference.
Thank you, Brett, and drive safely there. I can tell you're driving, and we do want you back. He's been our assessor since January, and we're not ready to give him up yet.
If my phone drops, it's because I see a CHP.
I'm not sure they've put a law into place yet that you can't be part of a conference while you're driving. Not that it should be.
2023.
Okay, so we're ahead of schedule again. Let me see. The next item on our agenda, get reorganized here. Rebecca from San Joaquin County, are you ready to do your presentation, Rebecca, or do you want me to have another little break before you get going?
Just give me like 5 minutes and I can get myself set up.
I'm thinking what we'll do, Carlos, we'll have Rebecca's presentation, and then Carlos, after we have another 15-minute break, we'll move on to your presentation and then just have a really nice long lunch break. Does that sound good to everybody? Nobody's saying no. So that'll be our plan. So we'll give Rebecca a few minutes, and again, if you are interested in being next year's host or the year after next host, or being the secretary for the group for those 2 years, please send your name to the officers at CCMA, or no, excuse me, officers at calmapping.org. Before I'm not president anymore, I'll maybe get the address down right. So that will get us back on track this afternoon. So we'll have a nice long lunch break unless Rebecca or Carlos have more than we have allotted for them and have a lot to provide us to give us more information. While she's getting ready, Rebecca Venegas is a GISP and is the principal GIS analyst at San Joaquin County Assessor's Office. She serves as the administrator of the Office of GIS Enterprise Systems and Parcel Fabric and leads a small and new GIS team to support mapping functions within the county. I don't know if she's quite ready, but as soon as she is.
I
Okay.
think I'm good. So let's see, do I have the power to share my screen here?
Yeah,
Let's
I think
see.
if you ask, I can give it to you. Oh, you
Can you
got
see
it.
that?
Cool.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right. So hopefully this isn't too in the weeds for some people, but I'll try to keep the technical jargon a little down, which is going to be a bit challenging, but I'll be presenting on the use of the data interoperability plugin for ArcGIS Pro for the creation of the purpose of this plugin is to create data translation projects with kind of minimal use of code. So you can integrate code into this system. And I come from the utilities sector, and this tool is actually very common in that sector because I think prior to, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago, Esri wasn't a major player in the utility space, but everyone else always is. So we kind of needed tools to translate data from GIS data from one format to another on a very regular basis. So it's a tool that I've become accustomed to using for this purpose, and I find that there's not there's not a lot of use of it outside of that space, which is I kind of feel it's a bit of a shame. So this is my plug for it. It is not included in your typical enterprise bundle. It is an add-on. And if you wanted to play with it, there's a few ways to access it. If people on your staff have a developer license with Esri, that's included in the developer license bundle for free. So you could always test it out that way. And if you have a personal use license for ArcGIS Pro, it's included in that. So it's kind of a way to preview this software, as it were. I'll show you one of my core workbenches that I use here. And if anyone wants a copy of it, you do have to have access to the license to view the pieces. But I'm happy to send that along if you can access it by either a personal license or that developer license. Let's see. So San Joaquin County is a megabyte county. So my example is covering the translation of the CAMA system data from our megabyte database and into our GIS database. So I'll be covering a brief outline of just what the plugin is and go over one of my common workflows utilizing this software. I'll cover integrating the plugin with Model Builder, which is a really nice function of it. And that gives, if you're more accustomed to Model Builder and maybe just want to incorporate some extra goodies that FME can offer to you, that's one way of integrating the two. And I'll use FME and data interoperability interchangeably. It is a repackaging of a software package called FME, and so I just find that easier to say than data interop. And so if you've never heard of FME, FME is considered an ETL software package. And if you do a lot of data translation, you may be familiar with the term ETL. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. And these are kind of your basic functions of any data translation process. You have to remove data from somewhere, you have to change it in some way, and then put it in a new form by the time that you're done. And so kind of what we refer to as the data pipeline. So it kind of gives you an idea of how this software functions and is put together. And it's very much modeled on this idea of a data pipeline. So you have source data. So in this case, my source data is usually some kind of extract file out of the megabyte system, usually an Excel file, maybe a CSV. You are able to connect directly to a database with the software, but that's it gets a little complicated once you start connecting directly to databases. So I'm going to stick with a much simpler model. And then in between, we're going to do all sorts of changes to our data. And then we end up at our destination, which for me is usually a GIS feature class table that I then use to either create a map or create a web application so that we can do different things with that data. And this isn't entirely code-free experience. There are places in the software where you can integrate some Python code to make your life a little easier. I personally use code to do some pre-job tasks for me and after job tasks for me so that I can fully automate what I'm doing with the FME process. Let's see, not quite there yet. So I'm fairly new to the business side of what an assessor's office does. So when I started looking at data with FME, I'm just going to go, I think my slides are in the wrong order. So there we go. So when I first started looking at data, I was looking mostly at spreadsheets that looked a lot like this. So I just have a spreadsheet full of data coming out of Megabyte with all of these property characteristics, and people are asking for some way of giving this data geographic context. And I kind of have a image here of what the GIS data looks like. We use Parcel Fabric here in San Joaquin County. And so this table on the right kind of shows how the GIS table is arranged in the Parcel Fabric, which is pretty bare bones. We have some editing specific fields, and the only real identifier we have is this APN field. And there really is nothing else. So if we wanted to do analysis based on property characteristics, there's no way of doing that without transforming the spreadsheet data that I get and then joining that data in some way. So a lot of my early explorations with FME were kind of translating Excel data and then transforming it into, what eventually turns into a new product, which is basically a GIS table with those property characteristics. And then we can make maps out of that data and use it for other purposes as well. And let me pull in my FME screen here. So this is kind of where the magic happens for me when I'm propping up workbenches. Ooh. Now I ran this morning so that you can see some of the features that it does. So this is your workspace for FME. And if you think back to the pipeline image that I had set up, we have our source data here. So my sources for this particular example is a connection to my production geodatabase. I can also connect directly to Parcel Fabric. It's kind of just, I've tried them both ways. They both work about the same level of speed. So then it kind of becomes personal preference at that point. So I can connect directly to Parcel Fabric and grab a snapshot collection of my data to work with because we never want to modify production data. And then I'm also connecting to a snapshot of our Megabyte data that's housed in an Access database. So this is something that our IS analysts do for me. I'm not a SQL guru, so I can't do some of these crazy SQL queries that our IS analysts do. I presume that if you're working in your mapping section or you're a GIS person in a mapping section, that there are IS analysts that are doing the role data collections for you and that you have access to some kind of data collection that way. So I do have database views that I stand up with simple SQL queries, but they don't reproduce the role data. So I usually use some kind of data collection. And this is kind of where I personally use some scripting. And this isn't super common, but FME lets you include some scripts. And what this does to help me automate this job, all I'm doing is going to the location of where the IS analysts have the role data collection, and then I'm making a copy for myself. And that runs every time I run this job. And I'm going through a few processes, and I'll go through what changes I'm making to the data, and it ends up going to the GIS database. And along the way, you can kind of see a record count. So if something's going wrong, you can see it happen in real time, and you can kind of narrow down to where your translation process is problematic. So this is my core collection right here. So I have lots of different workbenches, but they all start with these pieces right here, because these are the basic actions that I have to do every time I'm integrating GIS data with megabyte data. So I'm usually adding a key field here so that it can join to the GIS data later. And it's pretty simple. This is a powerful little tool that lets you see all the fields that you're dealing with. And then I add a field here at the bottom, and this is what I'm going to use to link to the GIS data at the end. And then I'm just translating some situs address information there, just turning it into a different data type. So that's typically what I do. The problem with receiving data in an Excel format or a CSV format, or even just in another format, is the GIS is very specific about data types. So if you wanted to make a web application with, say, a data filter, and you're getting a date field from megabyte that's a string, the GIS isn't going to recognize that as a real date. So by the time you get to a mapping product and you have a string date field and you want to do a filter on a date, and maybe say you want to look at sales in 2022, if your date field is not an actual date type according to Esri, it's just going to say, no, you can't use this tool because the data format is incorrect. So this is a product that can kind of do that for you. And we have some parcels that have special naming conventions that don't follow the normal rules. And so I filter these out and name them in a different way so that they match the naming convention in the GIS. So this is just particular to us. I don't think that's something everybody does. And these are things I have to remember to filter out. And we can even filter out when we set the data, data source to begin with. I have a real simple SQL query here just at the outset, and I'm just filtering out our mobile home records because that's not something that we typically work with in our mapped products. And just kind of these other property types that aren't standard. Most of my products are kind of geared towards the residential unit or the single family residential stuff. So I tend to take out anything I don't use. I do have workbenches where we work with this data, but since this is kind of my central copy, I don't typically include it. And then when I am connecting to my GIS data, I immediately filter out any inactive records. So you can do that before you process anything. And then you're only dealing with the records that you want. And then at any point along the way, you can actually take a peek. You can kind of see that happening below. You can take a peek at what's happening with the data at every step of the way, which when things go right, you don't need to do. But when something goes wrong, this is very, very handy because you can literally step into the middle of the process and see what's going wrong in real time. And so I find this very useful. It's not something you can typically do when you use geoprocessing tools in Esri, especially when, like me, we're dealing with data sets that are completely new to you. It was very useful to be able to kind of look into the middle of the processing and see where maybe a translation was going wrong, or maybe a field addition wasn't working the way I thought. And then everything is joined together here right before we spit it out. And here's where a little bit of SQL knowledge goes a long way. I'm defining what kind of join I'm doing. And I've made sure that both tables share a key field that I can join on. And then it spits it out into a GIS table, and I'll just bring up, there we go. And so this is the end result of the work table I just showed you. We have our GIS data, and it's joined with, and it's joined with all the property characteristics information from the megabyte table. So then you can do whatever you want with this data. You can symbolize based on, well, here I do have a quick example of that. So we can use it to symbolize maybe when property was built. So I have property characteristic data here. Oh, of course it's not working. Yeah, my goodness. All right. That's what happens when you do live demos. I'll show you the online version instead. There we go. So you can visualize now that the property characteristics are joined with parcel geometries. we can do some symbology based on some of those characteristics. So in this one, we have some dots that symbolize when buildings were built. So we don't have to click on individual parcels to find this out. We can just see what a neighborhood looks like from overhead and see when these houses were constructed based on the physical characteristic fields that we've added with this process. Or whatever else is in there. I can also look at maybe where the building size has changed. So each color kind of represents where the small houses are, which is these little blue ones, and then how houses get bigger. And we can make a quick little spatial analyses that way. So it's very nice. So this particular workbench, like I said, is my workhorse. I use it to do, oh, where did you go? There we go. I use it to do just about all of my data translations. So what this does, it does a few things for me. It's creating a copy of my GIS data as it exists without any, pre-join. And that basically is tossed into a monthly archive. So I'm creating an archive of my GIS data at the same time that I'm running this process. And then once I create the join with the megabyte fields, I'm also creating an archive of that. And what's useful about that is I get a lot of data requests in the office of people who want role data fields with GIS, joined with GIS data. And instead of starting the process of joining this data and creating this data for an extract request when I get it, I already have a monthly archive of this data. All I have to do is make a copy, remove the fields they don't need to see, remove the records they don't need to see, and I'm done. It saves me a ton of time. Before I had this workspace created, I was doing all of this stuff manually, which took hours. This workbench runs in about 15 minutes. So it saves me a ton of time on data requests and just automating the update process for some of our applications as well. Let's see. So you can also join these workbenches with Model Builder. So I'm going to go back and open up my GIS workspace here. I have some of this data sitting on our share folder, and if I let it sit too long, the connections die and I have to restart my session. So that's kind of the not so amazing thing of working with data in a disconnected space. So a nice part, because it's integrated into the ArcGIS Pro platform, is you can join Model Builder with FME, and this is an FME, a model builder model that I use to run one of my web applications. And it looks pretty hairy, but this last piece here is actually an FME model that I've integrated into the Model Builder workspace. And it's a nice way of integrating the best parts of both of the tools. There's some things that work better in Model Builder than the FME product and vice versa. One great example is Model Builder makes it really easy to create my monthly archives and add a timestamp to the file so that it has, so I know what month and date it was created. That process is very painful and clunky using the FME software, so I'd rather do it in Model Builder. This particular piece, this is just a small piece of my model here, but one of our IS analysts gets the final result of this update, and they do it, and they take an Excel file that comes out of this process and update a separate application. And so this Excel file has to come out in a particular format, and it has to be the same every single time it's received. And I've just found that the geoprocessing tools in GIS were not able to modify the Excel file the way I needed, but FME did, so I can just put it in there, and it's a fairly easy process. It's embedded in the toolbar settings, so when you create a new tool, I think if you have the plugin, it just gives you the option right there to add it in, and then you can, it's pretty much a plug and play. You plug it in and you see that I have two already in here that I integrate into two different model builder jobs that I have running here. And in this case, FME has a really easy process of taking files from one folder location to another. So this is another Excel spreadsheet that's created by our IS analysts on a weekly basis. And so I create a copy that's on the shared drive, take it to my local drive, and start this update process for one of my applications in it. And the nice part about integrating these spaces together into a model builder job is that you can use the ArcGIS Pro application to automate these tools. I'll get you to my little history tab. So I don't know what version of Pro this option starts to become available. I think if you're on Pro 2.9 or later, you can schedule the automatic run of any geoprocessing tool, model builder tool, FME tool. You can do that there. I'm not quite sure at what version of Pro this actually comes into play, but it's definitely available at 2.9 and later. We use Pro 3 here at San Joaquin County, and you can automate all your processes, which is great. So you can see when something runs, something's already run this morning. My monthly copy of the tax parcel database is already run, and there's a green check mark, so I know everything went well. And when something doesn't go well, you get your little red mark here, and you can open up from the automated process and see what went wrong. In this case, I have Esri's wonderful, very generic error where something went wrong, but we don't know what it is. So I'll have to poke around and see what happened. Typically, this is just some kind of hiccup in the network, and it'll run fine the next time. And automating these tools have a few caveats to keep in mind. And these are kind of rules that are the same across the board. If you're creating a tool with Model Builder or FME, it has to run completely and successfully once. There has to be some parameters added to it so that you can run, so that essentially you can open it up this way here. And you get a geoprocessing window pane. And so there has to be some parameters for it to hook onto in order to do this. And from here, on the run button, there is an option to schedule from here. And then you can set your schedule and it will run. And I find this fantastic because things are running even when I'm not working on it. So it's really nice. There is a limitation in that your pro software does have to be open and you have to be logged in. So a nice way of doing this is if you have a centralized enterprise server, you would open up your pro session there and just always keep it open and it'll run. I have it running on my personal PC, which is not best practice, but I am the only one who runs these things at the moment. So I just keep my session logged on and it will run. So if I forget and shut down my pro session, then it will not automatically run. If you're a little more tech savvy, and I don't have this propped up for you, is if you're comfortable with creating batch scripts and working with the task scheduler, FME has settings where you can create a batch script and run it that way. But that's a little bit more, that's an adventure in and of itself. So I do not have that propped up. I think the easiest way to automate your processes are just using the pro software. It's a really nice tool to have. And that is about it. If you wanted to learn more about this tool, there is an Esri community forum specifically for this tool, and it's a fabulous resource. There are other assessors' offices that use it, and so you'll see them posting questions specifically for assessor data on this forum. There's some videos on there as well. And if you have a question too, it's a nice place to post your own questions. I find it a great place to find examples that I incorporate into my own work, and it's kind of how I found out how these tools integrate into each other. So hopefully that might help someone with some automation processes in your workflow. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm gonna ask if anybody has questions, they can see, it looks like somebody's raised their hand. Jesus, did you want a mic or are you gonna just type in your question?
I just wanted to thank her for the demo. This is something that I'm not familiar with at all, but the explanations that she gave was just outstanding. I just wanted to say, well done.
Thanks. I was afraid maybe it was a little too in the weeds, but. And again, if you want the files that run these jobs, please feel free to email me. And like I said, you can view this if you have a personal GIS license. That data interrupt plugin is included in those personal use licenses, and also if you have a dev license.
As Jesus is from their surveyor's office. So one thing I realized, because he had contacted me, is we needed to get people beyond the assessor's office from some counties to really understand what was being presented. From my perspective, one question I had, you said you get requests for information. Are these mostly from people in the assessor's office or other departments outside the county government?
It's usually other municipalities, so other cities. We get requests from irrigation districts, from fire districts. If I have an internal request, it's usually maybe for a map or a specific web application, because they have access to these ComDev Excel files themselves. And since I have archives, there's usually some web app product that's already in use that has this data integrated in it.
Now, I noticed you are keeping a monthly copy of your data.
Yes.
Is that a necessity or is it a preference other than keeping a history?
I think it's just habit. I've
Okay.
that was drilled into my head at my last job to always have an archive, because you never know when bad things happen. And we did have a data request from a university that specifically wanted archive data from particular months. And while most people, when we have data extracts, are okay with the roll data, which is snapshotted once a year, some agencies specifically request that they want a current snapshot of where we're at as far as parcel development goes. The cities in particular want more current data than just the once a year data.
Leslie, you have a question? Your hand's up.
I can unmute myself. So I was just going to comment, thank you for the presentation, because many of the little nuances, and thankfully I don't have to do all this data involvement myself. We do have an IT person, and as we are transitioning ourselves to having these new layers, we were running into some of the same types of comments you were making about the data format and stuff like that. We are currently only working with an internal layer for our appraisers, and then going to migrate to a layer that would be more available to the public. So I guess I'm assuming, and that would be my question, is that you have two different, I guess, versions of what you're pulling together for these GIS layers so that you can use it both internally and externally.
Yeah, I have multiple versions of this data. So that was kind of my core. That's where I start. So if I'm creating a new map or a new web application, the workbench I showed you is kind of my starting point. And then I add pieces or remove pieces depending on who the user is. It's very easy to strip out fields using that. You just kind of knock them out at the end. You can just X out certain fields. So it's a pretty simple. If you already have the workbench, it takes a minute or two just to make sure that certain fields don't ever get generated to begin with. So I absolutely have a version that's for more, for extracts that aren't supposed to include personally identifying information. And then we have, the full roll data. I have about 4 applications I update, and they use kind of different incarnations of this data, and there's several ways you can go about it. You can strip it out to begin with, or you can keep it in the map data and then just make sure those fields never show on your web application. So it just kind of depends on what you're gonna, you kind of have to make decisions when you're thinking of making an application, like what exactly you're going to show, and then that's going to determine how you're going to handle it. So it's one of these kind of data planning is kind of what I call it. It really helps to know what your end product is going to look like so that you know what modifications you need to make from the very beginning. But I start all of my projects with that core piece that you saw, because there's certain things I always have to do, like handle those APNs that, you know, have their own naming convention, those 4,000 APNs that don't match the other 200,000, you know, those always have to be handled. Or, you know, if I'm including mobile homes or excluding mobile homes, you know, these are kind of like different modifications I have to make for the different versions. I have about 8 different little workbenches, but they all start with that same piece.
For your mobile homes, do they show up on a mapping layer, or are they just part of your database?
I have to separate them out into they're part of the database. They're already in Megabyte. But if you want to show them on a map, I have to do different things with them because they're going to be sitting on the same parcel as, you know, the parent parcel. So those usually have to be separated out as its own table, and then you have to do some other joining on the GIS end to deal with those. And I'm actually actively creating a long-term strategy for those so that maybe we can include that in a viewer. So that's not available yet. It's in process.
Yeah, that's something that we don't have as a part of our GIS layer, but I'm sure our appraisers would appreciate a little more help locating them at times.
Yeah.
But if you come up with a good idea, let me know.
I'll say you can look at, I come from San Diego County, and I came from an agency there, and I'm kind of taking a look at how they have their data arranged. They have kind of 2 separate layers, and they're a great example if you look at their data to see how they've handled condos and mobile homes, because that's kind of that's the direction I think I'll be going in.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of condominiums in Madera County, but we did set up a way of showing them when we created our parcel fabric. Mobile homes, though, were not even considered. So now that's going to be in the back of my mind, trying to think if we need another layer for those, but we'll see. Now I'm giving my appraisers hope. I can come up with more ideas than I have time, energy, resources, or the knowledge to do. So they're probably used to that. Anybody else have a question for Rebecca? Does this all feed into internal applications? Is this a part of something that then your staff in the assessor's office utilizes on a regular basis?
Yes, I showed you snippets of our neighborhood code viewer, and we have a separate application that's kind of where the assessor's office is actively redefining how neighborhood codes are developed and named. And so the appraiser, is it the assessor? Oh, I can't remember which section, but they're going through and giving new neighborhood codes throughout the county, and they're using the application to kind of track which parcels need a new neighborhood code. And we've also had some kind of issue with some of our megabyte neighborhood codes. So I've added the megabyte neighborhood codes in there so that they can look at the clean. So it's kind of being used as a cleanup app where they can look at where there's some sort of discrepancy in the megabyte neighborhood code value, and they can see what areas are affected, because there is a geographical component to this. It's usually specific neighborhoods that are affected, and then they can see where the problem is, and then they can fix it and send it to whoever does the keying in megabyte, and then they can fix it that way. And then we have an internal parcel viewer that we're just about ready to launch in-house, and this workbench is actually what I'm going to be using to keep it updated on a weekly basis. So that's pretty much ready to go. So hopefully in the next few weeks that will be deployed, and that will have information that's being hosted on our enterprise server. So I'm just going to be running it automatically, and I won't have to touch it.
That's always nice. That was one thing I wanted in ours, was less fussing the better. Excuse me. Leslie, you have another question?
I don't have a question. I was just going to say that for us several years ago, we did a large project to add neighborhood codes. It's really helped us with our assignments. But now that we're transitioning into GIS, and when they look into anything between the sales comp and these layers, having well-defined neighborhood codes and that can be coordinated with our land use codes has been a good benefit to us. So, I mean, books work in the meantime, but it really has added another dimension. We've been this way for a number of years. So I think seeing what I'm seeing from San Joaquin, once you add that next layer of those neighborhood codes, I think it's going to be amazing. I was going to ask though, at the end of these, are the presentations going to be available, and will there be opportunity to share these with?
Yes, we will provide a link once I figure out where that link's going to be linking to. After the conference, everything is being recorded, so we will get that out.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm looking at my own notes because now you said you thought this was available 2.9 and above.
For sure that's, yeah, I don't know when the scheduling of geoprocessing tools started, but I've used it with 2.9 and later. I did try looking it up to see when it became available, and I just couldn't find that information. So it's either there or it's not. So you can go look in your own processing, when you go into the geoprocessing list or tab in the catalog view. If you have the option to schedule, it's either there or not. And if it's not, your version doesn't have that ability. Yeah.
I think probably most people are at least on 2.9 because I think it's going by the wayside fairly soon. We're looking at 3. Our parcel fabric was developed in 2.9, so we haven't quite moved to 3 yet. So anyway, thank you very much, Rebecca. If anybody thinks of additional questions for Rebecca, you can send her an individual message, or you could put it, if you feel generally people would be of interest, on the chat. So our next item on our agenda is a break. So we'll do that and meet back here at 11. And Carlos, if you would be prepared. Did I see question or something? Oh, excellent, Rebecca, somebody said. I'm sorry, I just turned and saw something pop up. So Carlos, if you can be ready at 11, we will move on to yours. And you'll have plenty of time, and then we'll be a little ahead of the schedule and get back on schedule after lunch. So 11 o'clock, everybody, have a nice break.